He made the music that everyone loved, but he was never the famous one. While other people got all the attention, he was the one creating the heart of the music behind the scenes. From quiet music studios to big stages around the world, Benny Andersson lived through the start, the falling apart, and the comeback of one of the most famous pop bands ever. But the story he's telling now isn't about shiny disco balls or sparkly costumes. It's about being tired, feeling sorry, broken hearts, and the sad quiet time that came after all the clapping stopped. After people wondered for many years, Benny has finally talked, and what he says is deeper, sadder, and more shocking than anyone thought it would be. Before the whole world danced to Dancing Queen or cried to the winner takes it all, Benny Andersson was already busy making the hidden foundation of what would become one of pop music's longest, lasting success stories. He was born on December 16, 1946, in a part of Stockholm called Vassen. Benny grew up in a regular working family where music wasn't a job but something they really loved. His dad was a person who built things like bridges, and his grandfather taught himself how to play music. They gave Benny an accordion when he was 6 years old. That simple instrument opened up his love for melody and harmony that would never go away. Unlike many other kids who wanted to be famous, Benny didn't want people to look at him. He was more interested in learning how music worked. From the math-like structure of Bach's music to the down-to-earth stories in Swedish folk songs, he taught himself piano by listening and could copy melodies after hearing them just once or twice. By the time he was 10, he was already playing music for family parties and school concerts. People knew him not for showing off, but for really understanding how music should sound and feel. In 1964, when he was just 18, Benny joined a Swedish rock band called the Heap Stars. People called them the Swedish Beatles. When Benny joined, their music got much better almost right away. The group started getting to #1 on Swedish music charts with songs like Sunny Girl and wedding songs that Benny wrote himself. These early wins showed that he could write songs people would remember, and also taught him how to arrange music in the studio and perform live. People quickly knew him as the band's musical brain, and he quietly learned about the business and technical parts of making music too. Then something important happened in 1966. Benny met Bjorn while they were both playing music at a friend's party. Bjorn was in a folk-pop group called the Hootenanny Singers. He loved harmony, arranging, and details just like Benny did. When they played music together that night, they instantly became musical partners. Over the next few years, they started writing songs together, trying out different styles and structures, and even wrote songs for other Swedish singers. Their friendship grew strong, not just because they respected each other, but because they balanced each other perfectly. Benny was the emotional songwriter, and Bjorn was the clever word writer. By the early 1970s, Benny and Bjorn weren't just writing partners, but they were also dating 2 other musicians. Agnetha Falskog was a Swedish solo singer who had hit songs, and Annie Fridlingstad was a jazz singer who became a pop singer with a strong, deep voice. Their musical group formed under the long name Bjorn and Benny, Agnetha and Annie Frid. The name was awkward, but their chemistry was amazing. They tried and failed to win Sweden's contest to go to Eurovision in 1973. They didn't give up, so they came back the next year with Waterloo, a glam pop song that won the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest and instantly made them stars around the world. Soon after, they chose a name that was easier to remember: ABBA, using the first letters of their names. From that moment on, Benny was no longer just a pop musician. He was someone who built sounds like an architect builds buildings. He treated each song like a painting, adding layers of instruments, arranging vocal harmonies perfectly, and trying out synthesizers long before it became popular. In the studio, people knew him for being patient and wanting everything to be perfect, sometimes spending days fixing just one harmony until it felt emotionally right. He wasn't interested in what was popular. He was interested in what would last forever. Even as Agnetha and Frida amazed audiences in matching jumpsuits, and Bjorn wrote clever, bittersweet words, it was Benny who shaped the emotional feeling of ABBA's music. His special style mixed brightness with depth, a Swedish sadness hidden in melody. Songs like Knowing Me, Knowing You, and Fernando had this double meaning: happy on top, sad underneath. That was Benny's gift, not just to pop music, but to generations of listeners who felt something deeper in ABBA's seemingly simple songs. Really, Benny Andersson wasn't just making songs. He was building a kingdom, one where every chord, every quiet moment, every note mattered. And while the spotlight often shined somewhere else, the structure of ABBA's sound was definitely his. Falling apart while climbing higher for most of the 1970s, ABBA rode a wave of fame that couldn't be stopped. But as the band got more successful in public, it started breaking down in private. The falling apart wasn't sudden. It was subtle and slow, like a house that gets damaged by weather over time rather than destroyed by fire. The first crack came in 1979, when Bjorn and Agnetha got divorced. It was a very personal breakup, but the band tried to keep working together professionally. At that time, the group was working on their album Super Trooper, and though the songs still sounded polished like always, the recording sessions started to feel heavy and sad. 2 years later, Benny and Frida went down the same path. Their relationship had once been described as passionate and connected, a true musical love story. They met in 1969, long before ABBA, and built their connection through music before anything else. Frida said in a 1975 interview that Benny understood her in a way no one else did. But understanding each other in the studio didn't always work in real life. Benny's obsession with making everything perfect, which made him brilliant in the studio, didn't leave much room for being emotionally available at home. Frida, who was expressive, and by 1981, Benny admitted that he had fallen in love with Mona Norklet, a television producer he met during a TV special. He told Frida the truth, but the damage was done. The split was quiet and professional, but it cut a deep scar into how the band worked together. Their next and final studio album, The Visitors, came out that same year and showed the emotional coldness that was setting in. Songs like When All Is Said and Done and Slipping Through My Fingers were full of unspoken pain. The sparkle was fading, and though the band would continue for another year, something vital had already disappeared. For over 40 years, the story of ABBA's end was defined not by big headlines, but by a loud silence. Unlike most legendary bands that end with a farewell tour, a breakup press conference, or some final emotional performance, ABBA simply vanished. Their last official single, Under Attack, came out in December 1982. It didn't make the impact that their earlier hits did. There was no follow-up album, no world tour, no final bow, just a gradual fade into the fog of guessing and fan theories that would go on for decades. Their absence left an empty space, and into that space came endless questions. Why did they stop when they were still so successful? Did money tear them apart? Was it personal drama or creative fighting? For years, none of the band members gave a clear answer. Interviews stayed vague. The word hiatus floated around, and their public appearances became rare and carefully polite. In many ways, ABBA became a myth frozen in time, the perfect pop group that simply stopped existing without explanation. That changed in November 2024. Benny Andersson, who is known for being quietly thoughtful and avoiding personal publicity, sat down for an interview with the Guardian newspaper. He didn't come with a rehearsed story. There was no publicist-written statement or polished PR spin. Instead, Benny did something rare. He told the plain truth. We were exhausted. He admitted marriages were falling apart. The music was starting to sound unnatural. We needed to stop to save ourselves. That simple, unromantic statement hit harder than any scandal ever could. In just a few words, Benny confirmed what many longtime fans had always suspected. The breakup hadn't come from betrayal or fighting about art. It had come from emotional emptiness. After years of performing, recording, and keeping up the appearance of joy while their personal lives collapsed behind the scenes, the group was drained, not dramatically, quietly, completely. Then, in April 2025, Benny gave another interview to Billboard magazine, offering even deeper insight. He described the band's final 2 years, 1981 and 1982, as uninspired workdays. What had once been lively collaboration had turned into routine. He and Bjorn were still writing, but without the same energy or purpose. The songs came more slowly, the studio sessions were shorter, everything had started to feel like a job, not a passion. Even more telling was how Benny explained the group's decision to stop. He didn't call it a failure. He didn't make it sound romantic. He described it as something that had to happen. It wasn't sustainable anymore. He said, "We couldn't go on pretending not to each other, not to ourselves." This admission wasn't just enlightening. It was healing. For decades, fans had heard that final ABBA albums like The Visitors felt different, more thoughtful, more sad. Songs like One of Us, like an angel passing through my room, and The Day Before You Came didn't just sound sad. They were sad. There was a heaviness in the words and music arrangements that showed something deeper than pop trends. Listeners felt it, even if they couldn't name it. Benny's confession proved that feeling was right. The ache, the sense of something falling apart beneath the polished surface, wasn't just imagination. It was real. What's striking is that none of Benny's revelations were bitter. He didn't blame Bjorn, Agnetha, or Frida. Instead, he spoke of the band's end like a natural conclusion, like a beautiful machine that had run its course. "We had done what we could do," he said. "There was nothing left in us to give it honestly." For fans, it was the closure they never knew they needed. The mystery was no longer mysterious. The silence had a reason, and most importantly, the pain that had echoed through ABBA's final songs now had a name: exhaustion, emotional collapse, and the quiet necessity of walking away. Frida's path through grief and royalty after ABBA's quiet ending. Frida went on a journey no one quite expected. In 1992, she married Prince Heinrich Rosa-Roos of Plauen, becoming a member of European royalty. The Swedish press went crazy. How could the same woman who once ruled disco floors now be living in a Swiss castle, going to galas and banquets? But life as a princess wasn't the fairy tale it appeared to be. Frida struggled with the strictness of royal expectations. The spontaneity and emotion that defined her as a performer didn't fit into the structured world of royalty, and then came the deepest heartbreak of her life. In 1998, her daughter Anne Lot died in a car accident in New York. She was just 30 years old. The loss was devastating. The woman who once sang to millions now wanted silence, heartbroken in her secluded home near Lake Geneva. The glamour of royalty, the fame of her past, it all became pale compared to the emptiness left by her daughter's absence. And yet it was Benny who appeared during that time. Despite everything, he reached out. They shared a past no one else could understand, and in their quiet reconnection there was comfort, not in reliving the glory days, but in the understanding that only two people who had seen everything fall apart could truly share. Frida, who once needed the spotlight to feel seen, had now found peace in simply being remembered not by the world, but by someone who had known her before it all. Returning without regret in 2018, after decades apart, the unthinkable happened. ABBA reunited to record 2 new songs. The announcement shocked the music world, not just because it ended a 36-year silence, but because it marked the beginning of one of the most ambitious projects in music history, ABBA Voyage. By 2021, Benny and Bjorn had written a full-length studio album under the same name, and Benny had taken total control of production. But more than the music, it was the performance model that changed everything. ABBA Voyage wasn't a traditional concert, it was a digital experience. Using motion capture and avatar technology, Benny and the team recreated the band's 1979 selves, performing live with a 10-piece band at a specially built arena in London. The show was an amazing success. Since opening in May 2022, it has sold over 1.3 million tickets, attracting fans from more than 140 countries. The digital avatars didn't just copy, they went beyond expectation. Benny, always the craftsman, oversaw even the smallest sound design details, insisting that the performance be authentic, emotionally precise, and technically perfect. And perhaps most remarkably, the band said no to a $1 billion offer for a live tour. They didn't want to chase the old high. Instead, they redefined performance on their terms. The avatars, like Benny himself, didn't need to be seen to be felt. The music spoke for them as it always had. Letting the music speak the truth now at 78, Benny Andersson no longer hides behind perfect harmonies or studio walls. In recent interviews, he's been quietly unpacking decades of emotional restraint. He's admitted that music was his escape. He didn't know how to talk about pain, so he wrote it in songs instead. He once said, "I gave my best lines to songs, not to the people who needed to hear them from me." That line, so simple, so raw, changes everything we thought we knew. Benny wasn't cold, he was scared, scared to face the emotions that swirled beneath every love song, every breakup ballad, every hit that masked heartache. And that fear, that silence is what ultimately broke the band from within. Not drama, not betrayal, just fragility, the kind of human softness that fame never prepared them to handle. But there's beauty in his honesty, because by finally saying these things out loud, Benny is doing what ABBA never did, offering closure. He's telling us that it was never about perfection. It was always about survival. The music didn't save them from their pain. It was how they lived through it. And perhaps that's why the songs last. They were never polished fantasies. They were real, messy, complicated pieces of four people trying to hold themselves together. And now, after all these years, the quiet man at the piano has finally let us in. How do you think ABBA's music might have sounded if they had faced their emotions head on instead of through their songs? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful musical journeys.